It shows how an idea can move from being owned by a brand to jumping into culture itself.
Should have gone to Specsavers.
Thank you.
We were starting at that stage to look for the big idea.
No smoking, no drugs, no religion, no sex, and no humour. We sort of set to work on breaking those rules fairly quickly.
It's a campaign really built upon that emotion and that fame objective.
And I think that did definitely shift people's perceptions of Specsavers as being more than just somewhere to go to get low-priced glasses.
It became a joke about poor eyesight, kind of really breaking the last taboo in the optical market.
The IPA could just tag it with all of the ingredients that mark out successful advertising campaigns. In the Specsavers story, we see that very proactively, positively and courageously, excess share of voice has been pursued with advertising investment to drive business growth for Specsavers, even in the teeth of the early years of the recession. And that confidence and courage has been paid out back to the business in brand growth.
Specsavers is such a brilliant story to read. Firstly, it's such a long-term story, and there's so much therefore we can learn from reading this case study.
The starting point of Specsavers was the Opticians Act in 1984, which I think crucially the first time allowed opticians to kind of advertise their wares, so to talk about product and price in communications. Before 84, opticians were a lot more like kind of traditional doctor surgeries and professional practices than they were the kind of modern retail spaces that we see today.
It was dominated by lots and lots of independent practices. There was just one major chain, Dollins and Aitchison, and obviously a huge reliance on NHS. So buying a pair of glasses was something of a dark art, to be honest, because you never actually knew how much you were going to pay for your glasses until you got to the till and were presented with a bill. So the Specsavers core concept was all to do with having a clear price policy, which meant that we advertised and displayed all of the prices on the glasses so that people could see immediately how much they were going to pay. Back then, it was a really alien and groundbreaking concept to introduce.
They set up Specsavers as what's known as a joint venture partnership. So every single store in the UK would have been half and half owned by Specsavers Optical Group and by the individual store partners, who are typically the opticians who managed and run the day-to-day operations.
The directors of the store pay certain fees for the services that we provide, so IT, marketing, finance and so on, but they get to keep all of the profits. So naturally, the more successful the operation and the business, the better each JVP does as a result. And that allows us actually to operate as like a series of independent stores, but with the backing of a nationwide and huge national brand that gives all the buying power and economies and so on and so forth. The first Specsavers stores opened in Guernsey and Bristol, both in 1984, and we opened 2 or 3 more stores by the end of that year. But I suppose the biggest shift was something called 2 for 1 that we introduced, which was really aimed at trying to get people to see spectacles as fashion accessories rather than something that they had to wear because they had a problem with their eyesight.
In an advertising sense, the early years of Specsavers were characterised by typically press advertising supporting the local store openings.
So the extent to which any brand advertised nationally was tiny, but it was starting to generate a real good return for us. And I think by the end of that period, so we're talking really about the early 90s, the very early 90s, we were in a position whereby we had enough stores open and enough local and regional advertising to really start to challenge DNA for the leadership of this market.
About 1994, we hit a tipping point of about 200 stores, which broadly gave us national coverage. In an advertising term, this gives us a really interesting opportunity to start to utilise broad-scale national comms without too much wastage.
We then started to think about what was the best way to use this, and obviously we were starting at that stage to look for the big idea or lots of different messages of a more emotional nature that we could start to beam out to people.
One of the most notable ads from this period, I guess, was one that was termed Physicist, which featured Stephen Hawking talking about the benefits of better eyesight in a very deep, emotional way.
I had always hoped to see this in my lifetime. I have been wondering about the mysteries of the universe since I was a child.
And for us, that was really to demonstrate that at Specsavers we recognise the importance of people's eyesight and particularly taking care of them. And I think that did definitely shift people's perceptions of Specsavers as being more than just somewhere to go to get low-priced glasses.
My eyesight means a lot to me.
So by about 2003, there was a growing feeling for the marketing team that there was no real coherent thread running through the advertising. In particular, there was a set of internal rules that kind of guided their communications. One of them was no humour. I think it was Graham Daldry, the then and now current creative director, who kind of thought that humour might be a very valuable tool for building salience and connection.
It was a long road to introducing humour into Specsavers advertising. When I first joined Specsavers, I think on my second morning in the company, I got called into the marketing director's office, and he imparted the advertising rules to me, which were no smoking, no drugs, no religion, no sex, and no humour. So I walked out of his office wondering what I was actually going to write ads about. But I think we sort of set to work on breaking those rules fairly quickly, and I think our first humorous ad was probably called Derek. It should have been through a few iterations in its long and distinguished history. The ad that it started in was actually called Bread Bin, and it was an ad which was based on a kind of a family at-home scenario. And you should have gone to Specsavers was actually just a piece of dialogue from the ad.
You should have gone to Specsavers. You'd have got 2 pairs for the price of 1 then.
And that was really where it all began. We then decided to use that line as an end line, and the first ad that carried should have gone to Specsavers as an ad line was called Cafe, and the point of that ad was you should have gone to Specsavers for a more fashionable pair of glasses.
She's written something. Thank you.
What does it say?
Should have gone to Specsavers.
She's right.
In 2005, some of the brand tracking that we were getting was starting to show that we were starting to lag behind some of our competitors when it came to perception of style and range and fashionable glasses. And while Should Have Gone To is a brilliant concept, it doesn't lend itself very easily to be able to show good product. So the decision was made to move away from should have gone to Specsavers to must have gone to Specsavers, which meant that we could show people wearing some really great and more fashionable frames.
Sorry, you must get this all the time, but could I have my picture taken with you?
Of course you can.
You've got lovely sunglasses.
Must have gone to Specsavers.
So the move had fairly mixed reactions, to be honest. So we increased the TV investment. But again, when we went back to the brand tracking, we found that perceptions in terms of the style and fashionability hadn't changed that much. And if anything, people remembered the ads less.
Must have gone to Specsavers.
This revelation led them to return to the approach that had previously given them such good returns. But with it, they brought the high production values that they'd experimented with in the couple of years in between. I think there was one crucial shift between the old Should Have Gone to Specsavers and bringing back the Should Have Gone to Specsavers in this iteration, which was that it was no longer a joke about having ugly glasses or paying too much for your glasses. It became a joke about poor eyesight, kind of really breaking the last taboo in the optical market.
Richard Holmes joined the company in 2008, was a new lease of life for Should Have, and actually produced the campaign as we know it now, with Should Have Gone to Specsavers because you'll get better eyesight if you go to Specsavers. And one of the things that we did, or that we've done under Richard's tenure, is that we reshot Station. And it's quite interesting to look at the old version of Station and the new version of Station, because the old version of Station is quite coy, and the girl in the ad runs along the platform and gives her boyfriend a little bit of a hug, whereas in the new version, which interestingly was shot in Denmark, the girl goes for it, runs up the platform and gives the wrong bloke a really good old snog, which is much funnier, obviously.
Hi.
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 Sorry.
We've used Thunderbirds, Postman Pat, even the Mr. Men from Times, to ones involving high-profile celebrities like Gordon Ramsay. But I think the one that always stands out in people's mind is the one that we call Collywobbles.
Yeah, something always happens when we make an ad, and a couple of things spring to mind. When we made Collie in the Faroe Islands in the winter. And over the course of the 5 days, the weather gradually got colder and colder and colder. And you'll see in the ad there's a waterfall in the background of the ad. And over the course of the 5 days, the first day we shot, it was flowing freely. By the 5th day, it had frozen solid. So we had a little bit of a continuity problem there. And one called Whale, where Whale actually mates with a submarine by mistake. When we made Nemesis, which is the ad about the old couple who mistakenly find themselves on the roller coaster. The roller coaster is actually called Nemesis, and it's in Blackpool. It's one of at the time, it was the scariest and most extreme roller coaster in existence. When we cast for it, we had no problem casting because lots of under 25s wanted to be in the ad and to have an opportunity to ride Nemesis all day. They had to ride the roller coaster probably a total of about 25 to 30 times, and we found that after about 5 or 6 times, most of them had enough. And we had some quite poorly people by the end of the shoot. Interestingly, the older couple were fine.
What sort of cheese was that?
As the downturn hit in 2008, the reaction I think from many retailers was to cut their spend in an effort to return money to the bottom line. Specsavers decided that it was actually much more important to continue to support each and every store through this, and actually increased investment by about 20% in this period. This saw some absolutely fantastic returns, and if we look at where Specsavers are now versus the start of the recession, and where, say, a couple of our key competitors such as Boots and Donald Aitchison are, who did cut spend, we find that we're in a much, much healthier position.
Dad, the car's broken.
Campaigns that are famous get the brand talked about, get the brand remembered, and this really sticks in people's minds much longer. And so therefore I think we see the effects playing out over a much, much longer time. And I think that's why, say, in pieces such as Marketing Year of Accountability, we see the biggest and the most long-term profit gains from fame campaigns. Pursuing a fame strategy, we realised that in a marketplace without a lot of seasonality, this meant evening out the way we ran TV. So we aimed for as even a number of ratings over every week of the year as we possibly could do. So over this time, our investment in other ways to watch TV, such as video on demand, increased dramatically as well. I think for any business, effectiveness is fantastically important. For a business where you're delivering back to hundreds upon hundreds of different partners, effectiveness becomes absolutely paramount to what you do. And through building a econometric model to study the effects of what we've done over the past 3 decades, we saw that the return on investment from Specsavers advertising was among the best in the industry. This also seemed to lead to more people taking action. If we take an intermediate metric such as branded searches on Google, we saw our share of them increase by about 12% over the next 6 months or so, and this then translated into an increase in eye tests, which at that point were increasing by about 8 or 9% a year. And in all, this helped us make 2013 Specsavers' best year ever. Should have gone to Specsavers is a really fascinating line. It's one of these few advertising ideas that started to transition into culture. And we were able to use this as a tactical opportunity to boost the fame of this even more. A couple that really stick in the mind from the last few years were a bit of snafu at the start of the 2012 Olympic Games. The North and South Korean flags in a women's football game were mixed up for the national anthems. And this provided just a fantastic moment to bring out yet another tactical should have gone to Specsavers moment.
And one of the most successful things we've done obviously was the Suarez ad, which we ran in 2014 during the World Cup.
And of course it meant that we put the cannelloni Chiellini advert out within hours of the thing happening.
The Suarez ad reached nearly 3 million people, so it was really, really successful. We saw it had an effect on our tracking. Of course, it attracted thousands of likes and shares as well, which is a really good measure of people actually not just seeing it, but engaging it.
A really interesting part of our approach to this has been setting up a team to actively watch these moments of national consciousness, just in case something interesting happens, and also to react to it as quickly as humanly possible. So as soon as them happen, we make sure that we're in daily press the next day in the relevant sections, that we're running them on digital formats, whether that's online or even across digital out of home.
As a result of the Suarez ad, we've switched our Facebook channel over almost entirely to should have type material. which has actually made it one of our most important channels, and it really helps us to bring our material together and to help the material to have a coherence.
Our model of mass sale in advertising also provided a very useful template for expansion overseas.
Karen, I've got a cat with no pulse here. I need adrenaline and an IV line. Quick as you can, please.
See you tomorrow.
Action was taken when Specsavers expanded to Australia to open, I think, 100 stores within about 100 days, purely in order for them to be able to advertise at a national scale.
We have therefore since used some of the adverts that we created for the UK market down in Australia as well. And the should have gone to concept has worked really well in that territory, just as well as it has in the UK.
It's been a complete success story in Australia. Fantastically short period of time, they've become the market leader. TV's been a fundamentally important part of the Specsavers mix in that it allows us to have a continuous and very high profile presence. It allows us to reach as many potential customers who shop the sector as possible. It also allows us to create and maintain really distinctive brand assets, so in our case, should have gone to Specsavers, and make these as memorable as possible in people's minds. This model's been an astonishing success for Specsavers. In a little over 3 decades, they've gone from one single store in Bristol to almost 700 stores in the UK and a further 800 throughout the world, where they're market leader in almost every territory.
There's no doubt that should have gone to is almost part of the culture now. And the number of people that come up to you and recount their favourite should have advert or their favourite should have moment is many. But actually that also helps us when we're talking to prospective partners for stores. Because they are impressed at the level of advertising spend that we use. They certainly like all of the stuff that we use on television, and the fact that that is so linked to should have gone to means that they are already really aware of what it is that we stand for and love being a part of it. So it works for us on many, many different ways.
This study helps us understand the effects of advertising in quite a number of ways. In particular, the fact that penetration is more important than loyalty. The fact that fame and emotional approaches really out-trump rational ones.
They set out almost from the beginning to dominate share of voice, and not only have showed that it's paid back, but in spades. In a sense, from an IPA point of view, this is a great case because it really does illustrate and bring to life some of those key learnings.
I think Specsavers' success is very much a testament to the power of using advertising as an investment to truly grow a business rather than to, say, solve tactical short-term problems. I think interestingly it also shows that we can deliver healthy return on investment on comparatively very large spends, which puts it more into the realm of a true business investment than the little marketing pot on the side.